We have about what, 45 minutes or so, no more than that.
Okay,
Is
sure.
that good for you?
That's great.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. Hello, everybody. This is Multi Hazards, and I'm very fortunate to have Dr. Marcelo Gleiser, and I'm pronouncing your name correctly, sir, right?
Yes.
Okay. And we have a really exciting topic today. So, Marcelo, the first thing I always ask my people, my guests who come onto the program, is because we're in the middle of a pandemic and we want to forget about it, but we can't because it's in our face every day. So how are you and your family coping during this pandemic?
Well, we are doing quite well because we're fortunate enough to live in a rural area in a small town in northern New England. And so we are somewhat shielded from the chaos, let's say it, in the bigger cities. And so I would say we're fine. I mean, there have been obviously cases here, but not too many. The schools are open. My kids, my two younger kids are going to school every day. And that makes a huge difference because that was not the case during the spring. They were homeschooled and that was very complicated. And we're good. We're very safe. We're very quiet. We haven't traveled in almost a year now, which is kind of sad, but true. And so in terms of logistics, all is good. My wife is a clinical psychologist. She just got her first shot from the Moderna vaccine a week ago, or 2 weeks ago now.
Okay.
And she's about to get the second shot in a week or two. So vaccination is moving here in my state, which is the state of New Hampshire, quite well for 65 and up. And everybody that have been in a risk group has been vaccinated already.
Right, right. But I'm sure that in your part of the where you're working in the USA, they've had a lot of cases and a lot of deaths. So it's not a pleasant environment to be around. It's not like your team just won the Super Bowl or something, right? It's a kind of a sad time that we have to carry with us every day. So
Oh, it's a humongous tragedy. I mean, it's a horrendous time that we're living through. I would say that this is the biggest crisis of our generation. You know, we didn't go through a first war, we didn't go through the Second World War, but in terms of the global impact of a tragedy that is killing so many people, there is nothing like it in the last 56 years of history. So yes, from a more global way of thinking, not so much my family, which is in a little bubble here. This has, I think, has very kind of profound impact on the way we think about who we are and how we live and our relationship with the natural world as well.
right, exactly. Now, just for our listeners, we're going to be coming back to this question about the pandemic and its impacts on the world. But we're going to dive into a topic that Marcelo has written quite a bit about. Now, I spent these last few days. What was that famous book you wrote, The Island of Knowledge? I've been skimming through that, and I watched lots of your YouTube videos and listened to some podcasts and even in Portuguese language, because in Brazil everybody speaks Portuguese, right? Wow, there's a
Right.
lot of content on there.
Yeah. Well, I
So
grew up in Brazil. I lived there until I was 23. I was born in Rio. And even though I left when I was young, I always feel like, oh, a debt of gratitude to the country that essentially was my forming country and culture. And so I decided to, a few months ago, three young kids from Brazil, from something called the Latin American Leadership Academy, approached me and said, Professor, you should have a YouTube channel and we'll help you curate and produce and edit. And I'm like, okay. So I started to create content only in Portuguese for that reason. And now I have a huge following there and it's growing quite fast. I have over
okay.
100.
You have anybody from Portugal too, or any
Every
other
speak
countries that speak
Mozambique,
Portuguese?
absolutely.
Oh, that's
Every
great.
Yeah, I have people, and I have expatriates as well. You know, people from Brazil or Portugal or Mozambique that are all over the world, and they are following this. And we are almost at 160,000 8 months. And
Okay.
it's a lot
That's
of work,
awesome.
but I think Brazil needs it big time right now because of the horrendous conditions down there in terms of the government being an extreme right government and doing a horror. I think there was a ranking of countries that are doing the worst, of the ranking of countries according to the way they're doing management of the pandemic crisis. And Brazil is at the very bottom, the
Oh,
very
it's so
down
sad to
part.
hear.
And that's due to an inept government and that is anti-science. And so I felt that given what I do, I should create content for people as a platform for people to talk about these things, and it's working.
Right.
That's why there's so much stuff in Portuguese, not just
And I
in
love how you're doing science communication because my own story, I was like 32 years. This is like most of my life, knee deep. No, not knee deep. I'd say neck deep in religion. Like I was even a missionary before in Asia, and I did a master's degree. And I took out from my storage my journals and diaries from when I was a teenager. And I was like, some people now they would say, "Oh, you're fake. That was all fake." And I'm just like, 32 years of being fake. I was a good actor because I read my journals and I was like, "Oh my, I should have been a priest or something," you know. But the last 8 years, I've kind of got away from that, and now I'm really interested in science and then building a new worldview. And it's so refreshing. It is just unbelievably refreshing. Even hiking in nature and saying, I'm not separated from this nature anymore. I'm not like above and dominating this nature. I'm part of this nature. And just all these new thoughts. It's really exciting. So I think your university or another university, take me in, make me a lab rat, do some experiments on me. Well, there
well,
are other people like this, but it's
yes,
pretty rare. It's pretty rare. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah. Now, I kept thinking about the term spirituality. You've written about that, and I'm not going to read this whole quote, but on your university website, you said, "Can science fill the spiritual void?" And you talked about if scientists want to reach a bigger audience, then they have to figure a way out to start with younger people of a younger age with outstanding science education. It says filled with wonder and discovery. And then we have to transfer the passion people direct to their faith to fuel an appetite for wonder about the natural world and our place in it. And I'm assuming that's humanity's place in it. And we have to teach that science has a spiritual dimension, not in the sense of supernaturalism, but in the sense of how it connects us to something bigger than we are. So that's the whole idea about. Now, I want to just unpack that. You talked about science is not just a bunch of information, but it's transformative. That's life changing, right?
yes.
So, and then we have a wonder and a curiosity for the natural world. So, that's one thing I really thought that, well, especially the dominant European religion is sort of like, um, what's that Bible verse? It says, "Go out and be fruitful and multiply and basically dominate the earth."
Right.
And that has been the in Western culture and other cultures, because I lived in Asia, they're copying us, dominate nature. So I really like that sentence. And then you talked about spirituality, but I kept thinking, what is spirituality? If you're not actually communicating with spirits and things that are in a different realm, then spirituality is basically feelings. It's my feelings when I go to the forest as an individual, or when I'm in a group, I'm singing with a group, then I get lots of feelings, like at a rock concert, like a Super Bowl.
Mhm.
So sorry, I'm just wondering if you have some comments on that.
Yeah, so I see spirituality completely detached from supernaturalism. So there are two very different kinds of being a spiritual person. One of them is the traditional, monotheistic, or not just monotheistic, but there are hundreds of other religions across the planet that believe in some sort of spirits that are immaterial or supernatural, whatever that means, because I have an issue with that term, beyond nature, so to speak. But then there's this other kind of spirituality, which is really our capacity to relate to the mystery that surrounds us. And the fact is that even under the eyes of science, right? And I spent my whole life being a very serious theoretical physicist and trying to understand cosmology and particle physics and stuff like that. And what we do realize is that, yes, we have learned a tremendous amount in the last 400 years, no question about it. However, we also have learned that there are very, very many questions that we cannot answer presently. And there are other questions which are not answerable at all, given the narrative of science and the methodology of science. That is how science works. You know, science, in order to be productive, science has a method, right? It has a way of working. And the way of working is very briefly and very incompletely based on a hypothesis that you make about the natural world. You observe a phenomenon, you create a hypothesis to try to explain, oh, that's because there are forces that are being attractive and they're doing this or they're doing that. And then you go out and you create a model, in physics at least, to describe the hypothesis based on mathematics, and you go and you test that model. Is that a good explanation for what you're observing? Yes or no? If it's yes, great, keep using that model until you find a phenomenon that fails, meaning no model is complete, no model is perfect, no model is final. Science is a narrative that is always self-correcting. It's growing. Our understanding of the world and of the universe is growing, and that's just how science actually works. And also it has limits. It has limits by construction. If you think about it, we humans, even though we're amazing and very creative, etc., we do have limits. We have limits of observation, what you can see, what you can hear, what you can taste. And what you do is we amplify those limits using instruments like telescopes and microscopes and spectroscopes and MRIs, etc. that kind of, I call them reality amplifiers. They basically amplify our grasp of what reality is like, seen through our eyes always. But every instrument has a limit. No telescope can see everything. No microscope can see everything. No particle detector sees all the particles, which means that there is always a large fraction of reality that escapes our detection, right? And so, and we can never, people like to say words like the ultimate reality, what is the nature of the ultimate reality? And that ultimate reality, which is sort of the dream of so many physicists to reach the ultimate reality, is absolutely intangible. You just can't, because as I explained in this book that you mentioned, The Island of Knowledge, every time our knowledge of the natural world increases because we learn more about it or about who we are, the boundaries between the island, which is the known, and the ocean that surrounds it, which is the unknown, grow, which in practical terms means that as you know more of the world, you become equipped to ask questions, new questions that before you couldn't even contemplate, and that's the history of science in a nutshell, right? Think of how people in the 17th century looked at the sky before and after the invention of the telescope. Completely different ballgame, and completely different questions being asked because now you could see better, right? And this we could see better keeps going on. Like Nobel Prize last year was for the discovery of a giant black hole in the center of the Milky Way galaxy, a black hole that has a mass equivalent to 3 million suns or 4 million suns. And the only way this was possible is because the two astronomers, that it was shared by 3 people, but 2 of them were astronomers, they used instruments that were able to track the motion of stars, around the center of the galaxy in great detail. You couldn't have done that 30, 40 years ago. And then, boom, you find this thing, like every galaxy apparently has a giant black hole in the center. So that's a new stuff. That's new. That's a new story, and it's a new story that deserves new science. So that's how it's all built. But around this known, there is the unknown. And within this unknown, there are unknowables.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
mystery is fundamental to human creativity and to the way we contemplate reality.
Right, exactly. I know you were kind of critiquing Stephen Hawking's theory of everything. And I kept thinking, when I was in religion, and I've studied world religions, it's kind of the same thing. The scientists are almost copying the religious leaders. It's like, we have a package, we have a combo. This is a fast food combo. We have the fries, we have the burger, we have the drink, we have everything. And here you go. You believe this religion, you get the combo, or you believe Stephen Hawking's theory of everything, you've got the combo deal. And if you come up with a tough question, even that's not a problem, because we have seminaries, we have religious institutions, we have PhDs. They'll fix the problem. I think you even debated one of my former one of the professors he was at Regent College in Vancouver before, and you debated him. And so it's just, you were talking about being humble. We have to have a humble attitude and not say that we're giving a package deal, a combo to people, because this is kind of, it's like a door open, but you have to go through the door, but you're not finding everything on the other side of the door. You're only finding some things. And
Exactly.
yeah.
And it's funny, you say you went through a kind of a conversion from religion to a more scientific minded way of looking at the world. I went through a conversion within my theoretical physics career, because my PhD and the years after my PhD, I was also looking for a theory of everything, right? The so-called theory of everything, meaning, sorry about that, theory of everything, meaning a theory that could explain how the fundamental material components behave, like the particles that make up everything that exists. And people really believe that you could know everything and you could find everything about the world and find this final theory, right? There is a very famous book by a Nobel Prize winner physicist whom I respect a lot, called Steven Weinberg. He's an incredible scientist. And his book was called Dreams of a Final Theory, which is a beautiful book that represents very clearly the materialistic, reductionistic approach to the world, which is sort of the bread and butter of most theoretical physicists, including those that search for a theory of everything, right? So I was in that bandwagon for many years. And then I went through this profound change in my worldview, where I started to develop this incompleteness arguments that you cannot have a complete description of the world. That is by definition impossible, because you can never be sure that you reach the end. How can you do that? How can you be sure that underneath the present layer of understanding, there isn't more understanding, because you can't probe that guy, So I think that from a philosophical perspective, the whole notion of a theory of everything is, as you said before, a cultural inheritance from 3,000 years of monotheistic thinking in the Western world, right? And that is what I see. And so now I actually wrote not just The Island of Knowledge, where I talk about this, but before that one, I wrote a book called A Tear at the Edge of Creation, which is a very strong critique of the notion of perfection in nature. What I say is that it is precisely because nature is not perfect, but it is imperfect. There are asymmetries, imbalances, and these imbalances and these symmetries are the fundamental creative force behind everything that exists. For example, behind you, you have a waterfall. This water is running down the rock because there is a gradient, right? And this gradient allows for gravity to work on that water and bring it down. And that's a conversion of what we call gravitational potential energy into motion energy, kinetic energy of the water. And then you have this. If this weren't true, if all rocks were stable and flat, right, then there'll be no waterfall. So it would be a very sad place, a place without waterfalls. Anyway, so the book develops arguments about this from in fundamental physics and in biology as well, because life is also imperfect at the biochemical level.
Right. I saw on YouTube there's a new sport. I don't know if you have it where you are, but they take your motorcycle, like the trail motorcycle that especially the men, some women, they use it in the summer, and then they put these blades on it, like for snowmobiles, and so they've got, and then they have the sort of the tank tractor thing in the back. So they take their summer motorcycles in the winter up to the mountains, and they will go up any mountain almost with these sort of, I forget the name, it's kind of like these converted motorcycles, and it's more powerful than a snowmobile. But when I watched the videos and I saw these young fellows and they're going all the mountain, they say, see these mountains, we can conquer these mountains. And I thought, it's kind of a human thing. We want to go, and I mean, it's nice. We have curiosity. It's nice that we want to know more. But the problem is when we go into nature, we disturb it. You know, they say when you go camping, you know, bring your stuff in and don't leave trash or whatever. But we have to go everywhere. And we were taking these motorcycles to the top of the mountain, and you know, then an avalanche might come, and they're near us. So we have a ski mountain, and two fellows, they got buried and they died in the avalanche. And I keep thinking, I don't know. I think humans, sometimes number one, we need to be more careful. And number two, we need to be more humble. We shouldn't think that nature is there just to conquer, right? Mm-hmm. So,
and this is the narrative of the Old Testament, you know, that it is our dominion that well, it talks about man, but humanity, let's make it more modern. Humanity has dominion over nature, over the animals, that God created the animals essentially to serve us, you know, and that kind of narrative that is, some theologians would argue that that is not really what's being said there, but I think they are kind of backpedaling a little bit. It seems to me that that is the narrative, and that is the narrative that percolated through the Western world, that nature is below us, that we are above nature. And because we are above nature, we can control it, we can rape it, we can abuse it, and without any consequence. And that is the biggest mistake our species has ever done. You know, perhaps in the beginning of industrialization, and even before, we didn't quite know what kind of consequences this kind of rampant abuse of natural resources would have, right? Because essentially we built our current civilization by digging out stuff that was buried by millions and millions of years ago, right? All the oil, all the natural gas, all the coal, these are all rests of animals and plants that existed millions of years ago. It was like underground, right? And we sort of built our world above ground using the energy that we extracted from the bowels of the earth, so to speak, right? And not knowing that by doing so and by burning that stuff, right, we would be compromising our health and our future and the future of all other natural species, you know, plants and animals included, and most importantly, that of our children, right? So to me, that is the prerogative of our times, to kind of rethink about how we relate to the natural world. And the spirituality that we were talking about before is really about a deep connection with nature. You know, it's understanding that we are part, very fundamental part of the natural world, that we are indeed made of stardust, that all the atoms of calcium and iron and carbon that you have in your body did come from stars that exploded billions of years ago, more older than the sun and the planets themselves. Just think about that for a second, that the stuff in your body, you know, the calcium, the iron, the carbon, are over 5 billion years old. Wow. Right? And so you're a very old person indeed, man. You know, maybe you didn't know that, but now you do. It's just that this new conglomerate of stuff that is called, Ville Nelson. That is new, but the stuff that we're made of is not. We're really animated stardust. And once you start looking at things that way, right? And when you start looking at our planet and how rare a planet it is compared to all these other planets, you look at Venus. Venus is absolutely hell. I mean, if you want to think of a model of hell, it's Venus, right? The temperatures on the surface of Venus are about 500 degrees Celsius. It's so hot that the rocks glow. It's incredibly rich in sulfur, so it stinks. It has this compound, which is a sulfur oxide, sulfide oxide, that basically it's the smell of rotten eggs, and it rains sulfuric acid. So Venus is the model for hell. Perfect. I mean, the medieval kind of like, Dante's hell, right? Kind of thing. And there's no life there. I'm sorry about this whole phosphine, and there's a lot of noise right now about, oh, there's life possibly in Venus. They found this. There's no way, I think, there's life there for many reasons, but that's another conversation. And Mars is the same way, right? And the other planets, well, Mercury is way too close to the sun, forget that one. And the other planets are just giant gas balls. They're not even rock solid like the inner planets. And so Earth is a very special world indeed, and we have to understand that we evolved in this planet because we are part of this planet. We are completely connected to the way nature operates. We are the result of billions of years of evolution of life in this planet. And once we forget that, a little virus, 130 nanometers across, comes and lets us know that the virus doesn't care what color skin you have, if you believe in God or not, if you're a liberal or you're a conservative politician, where do you come from? It cares about you as a host for the perpetuating of life.
Now, I remember you said it was March 26, 2020. This is 10 months ago, 10, 11 months ago, for CNN in the USA. You wrote an article and you said you said it was titled COVID-19 will change us as a species. So I was reading it and I was wondering, do you have kind of an update on that thought after? Because it's funny, at the beginning, everybody was saying, oh, the world is going to change. And they had seminars and conferences. And I think that, not you, but I'm saying that the conferences, they were a little bit too early because they were like, yeah, this thing's going to be over in 2 months. But here we are, almost a year. We're a year later. So do you have some update on your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of what I said, that was, quite right on. I mean, in terms of, kind of exposing our fragility and our codependence, the fact that it is obvious how fragile we are, and now there are mutations of the virus. For those of you who do not believe in natural selection, the virus is mutating, folks. This is exactly how life works, and we have to figure out how to deal with that. And also our codependence. I think that's a very important part as well. The fact that the only way that society can remain stable is if all its parts keep working, meaning the farms that produce food, the transportation from farm to market, the market shelves that are still full and you can actually go and buy stuff. If that supply chain breaks down, chaos will ensue in 3 days, right? People say that social chaos is 9 meals away. Like if you don't eat for 3 days, hell breaks loose, right? And this codependence should doesn't mean it will, but it should be making us reevaluate the importance of jobs that sometimes we think are not that important. Oh, he's an apple picker. Who cares? Well, that apple picker is picking the apple that you and your kids are eating right now. And if it weren't for that person, you could be going hungry. That person and so many other ones. So this codependence, I call it the human hive, right? Just like the bees have this collective intelligence where they organize themselves so that people have different bees have different jobs and they perform the tasks so that the whole hive can thrive. Nice rhyme there. With the human community is the same way. we have all different occupations and different jobs so that the human hive can thrive, right? And it is just because this is still working that we are talking today, 1 year after this pandemic broke out. So I would say that those lessons are definitely there, and I'm hoping that one is the biggest hope. This is the work to be done, that we'll have lessons about our tribal differences as well.
Right, exactly.
Right, which is
Exactly.
really what the message of that essay was about how tribalism is detrimental for the survival of us as a species.
Right. Now, there was a couple professors, one here in Vancouver and one down in the USA. They wrote a book too that's talking about climate change. And then they said that it's called Climate Leviathan. And they were kind of putting out predictions for the future. But it was the same thing. They were saying that in the future, because of all the storms and all the havoc from climate change, government will have to get bigger, right? Government can't be small. You can't have a government that does nothing, or you can't have corporations who do everything. It will have to be the people united together, just forsaking tribal divisions and working on these issues. And COVID-19 is a perfect example. Have to work together or else it's just mayhem.
Yes.
So,
And it has to be a worldwide coalition, right?
right.
So what has happened here in the United States, this kind of a safeguarding of democracy, that was extremely scary, what has happened here, right?
Right.
And it still is scary because you have 74 million people that voted for Trump, which means there is a huge amount of discontent. But the point that I was trying to make is that what Biden has done and his group has done once they got into power is to reverse all the climate ordinances that were horrendous from the previous administration, precisely to tell the world that, hey, we are back into the game. And yes, we're back into the Paris Accord, and we don't want to just follow, we want to actually lead, So at least for the time being, for the next 4 years, hopefully more, we'll see. This country will fulfill its role as, I think it's 20 or 25% of the global emissions of CO2 come from the United States. It's something that ridiculous. And so they have the moral duty to lead this. And he is. So he's stopping drilling everywhere, right? I mean, in Alaska and the natural parks, etc., that the previous administration was not. There is a fight with Canada now because of that giant pipe that Canada wants to throw through the middle, right, all the way down to the south to Texas, and they blocked that up there. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen with that, but this whole mentality, as I was saying before, of creating the energy that sustains our current civilization based on the stuff that has been buried underground for millions of years, that mindset needs to change. We have to look to the sky for energy, to the sun and to the winds. There is plenty, and the water. Like one thing that Brazil does have, which is really amazing, is huge amounts of hydroelectric power stations, right? I mean, they are quite good at that because there are lots of rivers, a lot of water, and a lot of waterfalls. And so between sun, wind, and water, there is no question that we could change the way we do this. And that's what the old guard in the United States, and I'm sure in Canada too, is kind of terrified about, because this old way of thinking about how to sustain civilization is dying. And it's dying with a fight, but it's dying. Right?
Well, we have Canada, basically, I call it an extractivist country. We dig stuff and we sell stuff. We're not like South Korea, where they're going to build chips, they're going to build technology, they're going to use their brains and produce something for the world. We just dig and sell, and that's Canada. And when they're talking about the oil price going down, we need to switch to solar and wind and all that, people are like, no, we don't want to do that transition. We don't. And then it's like, well, you could make money. No, we don't want to do it. So we just kind of have to get over this stubbornness and be open to new ways.
Yeah, and Canada has so much land. So can you imagine how much energy from the sun hits the Canadian plains and the further north? I mean, it's a huge amount of energy, right? So it's not like there isn't a way of doing it. And it's funny you use the word extractivism because that's exactly how we refer to Brazil, which is the giant to the south. You know, Brazil is exactly the same way. I say to whenever I talk about this to Brazilian politicians, I say, you still live with the mindset of a colony, a country where the power that controls you goes there, steal the stuff and takes it away, right? The only difference that instead of taking it away, they pay for it now. So, but that's essentially the difference. But the mindset is precisely what you just mentioned, that they're not, I'm surprised about this in Canada, but certainly in Brazil, they're not creating a community of scientists, engineers, and technology oriented people that your example of South Korea is very good, but so is Japan, so is China,
Right.
so is India.
Mm-hmm.
Watch India, and so is Germany, obviously. But the point is that this sense that it's not just about picking stuff up to sell it, but creating new things. The only reason the United States economy is so powerful still is because it is a country of Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. Those companies are sort of the heart and soul of the economy of this country now. It's a country that is being dominated by, yes, there is a lot of other stuff. The old guard is still around, but the balance is definitely shifting. If you look at the stock market, you can see who is pushing it.
Right. Now, my hope is that COVID-19 will not bankrupt us all so that at the end we'll have some money left to actually do the transitioning and do the things we need to do. So
I don't think it will. And in fact, I am an optimist. I think that an optimist that works. So I'm not just the optimist that waits. Now, there are two different kinds. There's the
right.
active and the passive optimist. You got to be an active optimist, and I think that the vaccinations are moving. People are going to be more vaccinated. I know that there is a problem in Canada. There is a shortage right now of vaccines in Canada. But the pace here is excruciatingly slow as well. If you look at Israel, more than half of the population has been vaccinated already. I mean, okay, yes, a small country has only 8 million people, but still, it's an example of how when you centralize this sort of social medicine, it works. Because you can do it. And here I don't know exactly how it's functioning in Canada, but here it's everywhere, right? So each state has jurisdiction, and it's very complicated. So it's going to change, and it's going to get better. And I'm hoping that by the summer in the Northern Hemisphere, the world is going to be a very different place. And the question then is, what will be the lessons learned? Are we going to travel less? Are we going to do more video conferencing? Are we
Right.
going to consume less fossil fuels? Are we going to eat less meat? All those fundamental questions. Are we going to respect diversity in society? These are the questions that are being raised right now, and these are the questions that I'm really looking forward to see. Say August of this year. How are things going to be going in the world by then?
Right. I have one last question before you go, because I know you have a busy day ahead of you. This is totally, I didn't take notes on it, but now all these issues here, and I want to just pray. I just want to get on my knees and I want to pray. And I just want to, of course, I want to take action, but I'm like, who do I pray to? Who do I pray to? Who's going to actually listen to me and say, okay, Vin, we got an answer. Don't worry. I'll get moving for you. So I don't know if you've ever had that come across your mind. You look to the stars and you say, I wish somebody were there. I don't know, not my servant, but somebody at least can be my ally and help me out or help my society out. Do you ever get
Okay.
those thoughts? I know it's kind of a
Actually,
strange question.
no. It's a very good
Okay,
question.
lucky
Actually,
for you.
I
I
think
still get that question.
yeah, it's a very, very good question, because a lot of the impetus, the motivation for religion comes precisely from this need of some big protective force that will look after us and will take us in a new direction, and I believe that it is really within us that we have to find the strength to create the change. It's not so much waiting for it to come from the outside, but it's really, we have to be that force. If we believe that we need to change, then that belief, that faith in the need to change has to be the driving force to compel into action, to then become a force for change. And how do you do that? Well, you're doing this right now, Vin. I mean, you are doing the work. You are talking to people. You are spreading this conversation to your listeners, and this is who you are. And you are, in a sense, the evangelist of the modern way of thinking, and I think that's extremely important. And we need more voices like you around the world, and more people listening and more people talking. And I believe in the snowball effect. We do it, we talk to our kids, we talk to our students, we talk to our friends and our family, and this sense of a global way of looking at the human community will grow more and more. And a new mindset will dawn. We're still thinking like the Enlightenment. We're still stuck. The way we think about the world and who we are, how to deal with nature, it's still the absolute rationality and reductionistic way of thinking of the Enlightenment, which was very useful, but it's done. And we need a more organic way of thinking about us as a community of humans in a fragile planet. It's not an option. And,
Right.
And there are lots of apocalyptic voices out there, saying, this is going to turn into a big mess. It will turn into a big mess if we don't do anything about the climate, about democracy, about prejudice, but we can do stuff. And I think people are working for it. So instead of looking for that voice from beyond, before it was God, now could be some sort of a extraterrestrial intelligence that survived a million years. Say, how the heck did you manage to sustain a civilization for a million years? We are like messed up in 10, 15,000 years. How do you do that? Well, we have to figure that out. And the only way we can figure that out is by boots on the ground and opening our minds to change.
Well, I hope we're here in 100,000 years. I'm hoping we're here.
I hope. So, I don't know who we will be in 100,000 years. That's another conversation. But
exactly,
wherever we are, absolutely.
Great. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Marcelo. And I learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners did. And I will let you know when we've processed everything. And I hope you have a great day and a great weekend.
You too. Thanks for calling in, and good luck with everything.
Okay. Stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.